Welcome to Mojo Nation's Play Creators Festival. This is Desert Island Picks. I'm Deej Johnson, and I've invited toy industry figures to maroon themselves on a desert island with a number of things to pass the time until rescue. Today, it gives me great pleasure and no money to welcome Phil Sage. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Deej, how's it going?
It's going very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, and yeah, great to be connected, and always a pleasure chatting.
Well, thank you. I hope that's true. I saw you very briefly in New York, but not for long enough. It felt that we had an hour, I think, and then we sort of sprinted off with plans to reconnect, and then it all disappeared and dissipated in a way that that these things tend to at New York Toy Fair in particular. So yes, yeah. It's good to see you. I was going to check your job title. I have you down as Senior Director, Product Development, Design, and Inventor Relations. Is that right?
That is right, and it's part of a newly forged design center of excellence at Hasbro, led by Jared Wade. And we operate as a playmaker. And what that means really is that we work very closely with our core development team, first and foremost, our marketing partners, and obviously our senior business stakeholders. So we can extend their capabilities on current strategy for the brands. Mm-hmm. So we then accelerate their innovation growth through new ideas. And it's often the case that we draft from big opportunities from our extensive global innovation network. So it's a really, really exciting role, lots of fun. And obviously what impact we bring needs to be meaningful. And certainly allows our brands to grow and our categories to grow for that matter.
And let me ask you, Phil, because I don't think you and I have chatted about it in the past. I'm always curious to see how people got into the industry. And I know that you're a farm boy from Wales, right? This is where you're from, and yet that's not where you've ended up.
Yeah, it's been a great journey, right? So my undergraduate university in Swansea, that's where kind of I cut my teeth in my portfolio, which really kind of focused on a lot of fun themed initiatives and projects, kid orientated. There was actually a little bit of vehicle design in there as well. But I really kind of found myself in this awesome industry by landing the first role at Lego. At the time, relocating to Denmark back in 2002. And yeah, it was a fantastic 360-degree experience, to be honest with you. And it really fueled my ambition to grow in the industry. So yeah, certainly kind of, I left Wales, but yeah, I've never forgotten and always gone back. And yeah, it was just a great time in my life at that point in time. And then I joined Hasbro Europe. It was called Hasbro Europe back then. And the rest is really history. And that was back in 2004.
2004. So if you went straight from Lego, you presumably went to Lego very young.
Yeah. I mean, it was relatively fresh out of university. So, it took some time, applying to roles all around the world. As far as Asia, as local as, up the street. And yeah, there was a lot of kind of drive after, graduating, with a great class and, all the tools that I needed at that point in time. Right. But then, the hard bit is converting, into a full-time job, into a full-time role. And then, the experience really starts, so, and yeah, like I said, I was very fortunate and very grateful for that period of time. And yeah, like I said, it really kind of fueled my ambitions to grow in this industry.
I'm curious, what do you think it was? Because I in my head, I'm imagining that working for Lego, getting a job at Lego feels to me like it's going to be a little bit like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that there's golden tickets. You only get so many people coming in. They must be one of the most illustrious and well applied for companies in the world to work for. What quality do you think that you have that they wanted?
Well, I mean, obviously you go into an interview process and it's widely documented, as you know, through the various documentaries that they put out there. But, the process was very long and, but very exciting at the same time, and you were in there with, some of the best students like you rightly highlighted, that have come from all parts of the UK. In my case, all parts of the world. And you're in there to really kind of show, what you can do, but how do you ideate? How do you culminate prototypes? And how do you build, and how do you express some of them ideas from paper to brick? And so it was an exciting process. By the end of it, everybody was, felt good about what they'd done. And there was 5 roles on the table out of the cohort that I went into the business within. And yeah, like I said, I was fortunate to have one of the 5 positions made available. My angle has always been to try and kind of mix mediums. So I'm, very kind of, keen on technology and progressive trends, as well as kind of, the core kind of, the core building, tactile build that, that they're very famous for. So I basically combined the two and come up with some, some pretty kind of boundary pushing things. And it worked, it worked in my favor, and it was the recipe they were looking for at the time. And yeah, the journey started from there.
Interesting. And so I'm going to assume then from our Desert Island picks that one of the toys that you played with growing up would have been Lego. I'm sure that's the case. But if you were to take one toy from childhood, or let's say 2, let's be naughty. Let's say you've got 2 toys to take to a desert island until rescued. What toys would they be? What childhood toys would they be?
Well, it's a big question, right, Deej? I think I'm going to take a little bit of advantage on this one, right? So I'm going to pick out a few more than just 2, right?
Are you now?
The reason being, I think, is you go through certain phases and motions as a child, and I've got really vivid memories of quite a few of them. So there was one toy called Build and Play by a company called Durocaster, and they are a giant Meccano set. They're a French company, and they can basically combine boxes and wheels and axles and oversized plastic nuts and bolts. And I was building spaceships and jeeps and race cars and tractors, and I used it so much that I kind of I wore the threads on the actual little kind of plastic nuts and bolts that you put it together. And my parents actually struggled to get a replacement for some time at the time. And so yeah, obviously that there's definite certain references then to Meccano and Lego, which I was also into at the time.
Well, that's it. The Build and Play set was like was to Meccano as Duplo is to Lego, I guess. It's like a sort of chunky Meccano.
So, and I can remember it vividly, and even kind of putting my baby sister, in these jeeps and creations, and kind of pushing her around the living room. And my parents kind of, not too happy about the marks that I was leaving on the carpet, right? But yeah, I think it's products like that, and which really kind of fueled, I guess, looking back on that kind of initial kind of entry point into the industry. Now, if I'm to switch lanes a little bit outside of construction, I had this awesome, rally burner with blue tires. And Deej, I think I've shared a picture with you, in the past of me dressed in a Batman outfit, racing around my yard, again.
You shouldn't have said that. That'll come up now.
Oh, right.
We'll have that done.
Yeah, honestly, it was definitely a love of mine. And then furthermore, I did spend a lot of time outdoors. I had a beloved go-kart, which, I actually kind of pretended it had an engine on it. I would take it down to my grandparents' farm and race it around the yard. And furthermore, and kind of this leans into kind of the person I am today, I began tinkering with it. So, on a farm, you've got a lot of access to pipes and twine and rope and, empty milk jugs and things like this. So anyway, I began kind of lashing these to the framework of the actual go-kart. And it was pretty impressive, I think one time I built a structure over the top of it, which was protecting me from the rain. So yeah, I definitely kind of used it as a chassis and built my own vehicles on it. So yeah, again, very much outdoors, and that was certainly a very iconic and something I remember fondly from my upbringing. The other things that I do remember, on an action figure level, the 80s Thundercats and Ghostbusters, the old classics.
Yeah.
Egon with his kind of you rotate the beam as such coming from his from his weapon, and it was just I think I collected a few of them. I had the truck; it was awesome. And on a digital front, we cannot forget how important digital is, not just because the time we live in today, but I had a Commodore Plus 4 with Treasure Island and Fire Ant and many other kind of titles, which you loaded up with a tape cassette. And it had all of 64 kilobytes of memory. So, you could say that at the time it was cutting edge, but when I look back in it, and I'm sure you could find them on eBay now, they're probably worth a fortune. For that matter, my dad may well have it in his attic, but yeah, and Sega Master Systems with Altered Beast and Sonics and Alex Kids. So definitely that digital side was present at that point in time.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because much as those technologies fade and they are obsolete so quickly these days. I mean, the idea, I remember having a ZX Spectrum that you loaded with a cassette, and that just
the noise is just great.
You leave with a migraine 20 minutes later, it's still unloaded. But once you got to the play patterns that were classic then, I think to some extent remain classic now, that the graphics change and everything gets better and more brilliant. But to some extent then you could argue you have to use your imagination a little less. It's not so, Jet Set Willy where you have to go and find all those glasses around the house, and the graphics are dreadful, absolutely dreadful by comparison. But it was still fun for us to play. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's not that you sort of...
Well, I think they were solid building blocks, and obviously an entry point into digital gaming as we know it today. And particularly people like myself or within my generation, we still reflect on it. And to that matter, there's still product available today where there are plug and plays. You plug it into a HDMI and then you fire up your old titles. And that really kind of just shows how meaningful it was at that time. And I think when you see that evident at retail and evident when you see potentially siblings or see your children play and engaging with it and the fun it brings them, it's a timeless classic, and it's just good that they've gone through these the retro will never go away, and the retro will always be relevant in certain phases and certain cycles.
Yes, it can't be a coincidence that Lego's newest range, the Nintendo range, is just something that's absolutely, people of our age are looking at it and say, oh, this is a sensation, because you're immediately connecting with a nostalgic vibe that is also still relevant, because the kids can still play with that the way they play with it. And actually the tech in the Nintendo Lego is extraordinary. It's incredibly clever. I personally am not sure that I see it being one of their absolute stalwarts for a long time, because I think you'll get bored playing that way with that set real quick. But for now, what a joy it is to see it in terms of that immediate nostalgia payoff.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of companies are doing it. We're certainly doing it at Hasbro. There's a lot of classic. If you look at a lot of the classic brands that we have, we put certain exclusive product out there in certain times of the year. So it's there to be celebrated.
And let me ask you this then, Phil. You also played board games, I'm assuming, when you were growing up. Same question, I guess. If you were to take one board game from your childhood and say, this is the one that I would take because it meant so much to me, which one of those would you narrow it down to?
Yeah, I think for me, board games were important growing up. Like I said, I was very much into a lot of things, and that's probably why I highlighted, 5 of my favorite things when I, from a toy perspective. But on a gaming level, the one that stood out for me was Milton Bradley's Hero Quest. It's my most vivid memory with my friends, where, you're obviously choosing between the elf, the dwarf, the wizard, and the barbarian, and then the hours and hours of kind of quests where, that challenging each other. And then, obviously that was a great success at that point in time. And, when I joined Hasbro, and I did not know this till I joined Hasbro, is that, one of them, namely HeroQuest and Space Crusade, were under the umbrella of Hasbro, under Milton Bradley. And then furthermore, when I was working and engaging with our East Longmeadow office at the time, a fellow Brit and friend, Stephen Baker, who's a prolific gaming designer, he actually designed the thing.
Oh, right.
So he actually designed HeroQuest. So I was totally in awe of, this wonderful game that I treasured as a kid. But also then, just to dig deeper with Stephen on, his thinking behind it was, really great to hear. And, and to that point, a lot of designers, at Hasbro, they have some great achievements to their name. And so yeah, that is definitely one, purely because it wasn't too long to play. At the same time, it was very easy to break down. And, as you look at the Wizards of the Coast brand that we have now, and the Magic of the Gathering, there's obviously kind of been some great kind of accelerated kind of development in that area for Hasbro in the last, several years. And, they're doing, great business for Hasbro right now.
It's interesting. It's not a game that I played or was familiar with, but interestingly, this is the fourth Desert Islands session that we've done, and this is the second time it's come up. So 50% of people trapped on a desert island are quite all right. It's a small survey, but that's.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of a lot of eyes on the Wizards kind of Wizards of the Coast brand as a holistic kind of experience. Purely because how well it's doing and how many players are doing. So it's kind of obvious to start to try and make the chain connection to classics like HeroQuest, right? So maybe that's part of why it's come up.
And you mentioned that you were talking to designers, which I guess you do an awful lot. I mean, I've seen you having conversations. You seems to me, Phil, that you operate in a very very laid back, very open, very transparent, a very casual way. And I've seen you talking with inventors, and you hang on their every word. You just absolutely, well, I can't think of a better way of putting it. You hang on their words, and I'm never sure whether you're just inside out curious about what you can learn from every conversation, or whether you're specifically thinking, God, this person I know from X and Y and Z, so I better pay attention. Which is it? Are you just insatiably curious all of the time?
I definitely curious, but I think, what's really important for me is that, the inventor community at large it's very important to the industry. Equally as important as the R&D teams that exist in the buildings of, all the top toy and gaming companies around the world. And what's really interesting about the inventor community is every single one of them has a different background. They have a different profile. They have a different set of skills. And what's really, really interesting when they start to combine skills and they start to forge relationships with each other. And so, whether you're a fresh kind of innovator coming into that network, curious to know more on how it works with the toy and gaming industry at large, or someone or a group or a large company who's been doing it for 30, 40 years. There's always different stories, and there's always different storytelling, and there's always different backgrounds. And what I love most about it is that they all collaborate, they all talk, and they all stitch together. And often the case, it's someone that that may be a fresh face for that matter. And they'll tell me about, what they're up to and their interests. And, it's very easy for me and others for that matter to say, actually, you may want to go and talk to so-and-so from London, or so-and-so from California. they may be able to add value or perspective to some of the things that you're working on. So I think it's our role to really be a catalyst in this network, to make sure that people continue to have the right conversations. And, when they do bump heads or creative collisions, like I like to call it, the magic happens, right? So, of course, when you put, more than one head on an opportunity, something better is going to come from it. And that's what I've loved most about them engaging kind of conversations. And obviously, it's important that Hasbro are front and center in their minds when they do feel that they're at a point that they want to present an idea, that they have a platform that they can, and they have a relationship that they can go to. So that's really kind of how I'm geared on that side of the business, and obviously then work in harmony with our global product acquisition team under Rich Maisel, who you know well, to either connect the dots or continue the conversations.
Interesting. And you said, I do know Rich Maisel. I don't know him that well. I've never, worked unpaid in his garage, which I understand is the thing. But he's a lovely guy, and like yourself, very generous with his knowledge, which is something that actually, relating back to what you just said, I'm really curious about that, because there are plenty of people, and I would never want to say, although I think I could, I don't want to say that the majority of people have this attitude or that attitude. So I will only say that in my experience, it's rare for people to have a bountiful mentality or a plentiful mentality such as yours, where there's enough for everybody, collaborate, work together, share, talk. And be so articulate with it. I like to think that the toy and game industry is that way inclined, but every so often you get somebody who would never pass on a detail, they'd never give you a phone number, you'd get blood from a stone sooner than a helpful word from them, and they stand out a mile in the toy and game industry because they look so oddly out of step with people like you, notwithstanding that you are, as I say, more articulate about it. But yeah. I'm sorry, go on.
No, I think, I think you raise a good point. Obviously the conversation and the genuine kind of interest in having a conversation about something that they're passionate about is, it's really important, right? And it comes from a genuine place. The second and more important thing is that they feel that they are protected, right? Let's just say that, you must have the right tools, the right infrastructure in place, the right agreements in place for them to feel like that they can open up. And so, what Hasbro has done is work very, very hard into building these tools, which allow a new inventor, a seasoned inventor, to come forth and be confident in sharing what they have. And Deej, more than anyone, is that lots of people, they have either filed patents or they are, very deep into building prototypes. And I think, there's a lot of time and effort and resources going into that, right? And so, the most important thing is that layer of protection is put in place. So I think behind a really good conversation, there's then the infrastructure and the trust. Yeah. And I think the trust is really important, because like we said, we need to make sure that both the inventor, their innovation is protected. At the same time, Hasbro is protected.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you say trust, and I think that's a really good point. It's very easy to point to a company Hasbro's size and more or less say, well, they could steal this, they could do that, they could do anything. And again, anybody that says that, I think, well, I'm hearing a lot more about your view of the world than I am about the people you're talking about. Because if you think that the whole world's out to get you, that your idea is so brilliant that somebody's going to rip you off at the expense of their own reputation. And yet, there's a story that I tell about a magician who had an idea for a trick, and it was about phobias. I think he was working on a trick about having a phobia, and he got stuck. He was stuck on one move in the sort of method, and the presentation was fine and all this, that, and the other. So he emailed his mate in America. He was in the UK. He emailed his friend from America. And his friend emailed back and said, "Are you joking?" And this magician, John Allen, said, no, I'm quite serious. Why would you think I'm joking? And the guy in America said, well, I've just had an email from another guy in the States. He's come up with the same trick, same routine, same phobia, same thing exactly. He's doing it the same way as you. He's got stuck in the same place, and he's emailed me for help on the same move.
Oh.
It's just, and you hear a story like that, and your mind's kind of blown. But my fear with things like that is if those two things had not coincided, how quickly is one likely to say, oh, he stole my idea? When in actual fact, two people coming up with an idea, given the number of billions of people in the world, it's not that improbable that two people will have the same thing. What's improbable is they go to the same person for the same solution. But even when you break that down logically, it isn't. So I'm very slow to hear the word thief. And I'm very quick to hear the word coincidence and surprise and all of those things. And I think that's what I always get from you, Phil, this vibe that it's a lovely industry, that there's open discourse, you can have a conversation, and that people are doing their best for the most part by each other to help each other on the way. And I think you embody that more than most people. Not to blow smoke up your arse, Phil, but I'm a big fan. So then going back to your board game, it's a sort of it's an entry level. I'm saying it's an entry level kind of strategy D&D style game, Hero Quest, but it needs another player. So if you were to wave a magic wand and have anybody living or dead join you on the island to play Hero Quest, who would that be?
I mean, there's lots of people that we,
present company excluded, obviously.
Yeah, of course, Deej, of course. I mean, there's a lot of great people. I've got a lot of people that, you follow, you admire their kind of, their presence in the world, what they do. But if I were to pick one, I think hands down, fellow Brit Richard Branson. The reason, yes, he does have a lot of admirers and he's extremely successful as a British entrepreneur. But, what I really admire is that, innovation is not easy. In fact, it's very, very hard. And, you and Billy and the team know that much. It's really about, the harder it is, then the more innovative it is, and the more break-frame it is. And I admire Richard Branson's resistance, his resistance to competition, to critics, his ability to overcome monopolies, to conquer industries and sectors. And furthermore, the people that he recruits, his recruitment philosophy is just phenomenal. I've used as this as an anchor within my own kind of my own personal growth, but I'm a firm believer you're only as good as the team around you. And consistently, people like Richard Branson, they know when to partner, they know when to accelerate an outrageous, ambitious goal, and they know when to bring on board people to accelerate that. And so, you look at Virgin Galactic, you look at the new supersonic jet stuff that is in the news and the tabloids right now. I would love to trade some stories. Deej, you know me, I love a chat. And I'm sure, my word, I could learn a lot from him on a desert island. Definitely probe on a lot of his big projects. But yeah, his grit as much as his vision.
Interesting. Gosh, yeah, you're right. He would, of course, be. It's difficult because right now I think he's getting a bit of his backlash. Is backlash too strong a word? I think there's a difficulty with Richard Branson right now, in as much as he's obviously way low, knocked down by not literally the coronavirus. I don't think he's had it. But the airline industry being what it is, and Virgin struggling as it has started to, understandably, Branson's held out his hand and is sort of asking for a bailout. And it's very difficult because I think something that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have sympathy with is that you've got a man with £4.5 billion saying, I need a loan. What's happening here? I need help. Whereas I don't think people that are sort of aggressive about that in the press would necessarily be looking at that in the context of the money is probably safer with Richard Branson in terms of a loan. I mean, if I was going to lend money to somebody, I'd lend it to Richard Branson. It seems like a fairly safe pair of hands in terms of an investment. But his charisma isn't, it seems, sufficient to propel him through these difficult times. And I think it's very difficult for somebody like that to know where to put themselves. He said he would put his island up as collateral for a loan. But everybody, well, why don't you just sell the island and put that money into it? Give it to the workers, albeit that they're shouting this through a letterbox. They're not in the position to know the man. But he is undoubtedly, and given the longevity of his career, a phenomenal influence. And I would argue one for good in almost every industry. And he's done so many. He seems to be right across the board.
Yeah, I mean, he started with, with little, in terms of kind of beginning his, record company out of out of telephone box, and, that kind of, that spark to kind of begin to start to think, okay, you know what, I'm going to start small and then accelerate to something more significant. I think, it's evident in the startup world as we know it today, and the multitude of, accelerators and incubators that exist today. And, I think, people are starting with a seed and they wanted to grow, into an oak tree, right? And so, the reason that I find him, that level of resistance is that he's managed to grow, an orchard of oak trees, right? And so it didn't stop at one. And certain companies, they'll do one thing really well and they'll accelerate it and they'll do extremely well out of it. And but yeah, then there's the okay, yeah, that's done. Now let's kind of look to the next. And I think that is, that is just so impressive, from a personal kind of opinions perspective. And, I'm sure that it's had its, good effects on, other industries, including, what I just mentioned with startups.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think he's got. I like the way you put it, the orchard. I think that's very nice. It's exactly the way you put it. You can found the company and sit back and say, well, I've made my millions, off we go. But he continually reinvests and innovates and reinvests and innovates in areas where you think, well, what's the guy that he's made one Mike Oldfield record. What's he doing? Starting an airline? What's that got to do with it? But I think to transfer your skills from one area like that to another is it's very bold. It's very brassy, and of course you're going to get egg on your face from time to time because you haven't dared to take that risk. There's an element of audacity to it, which I think is tremendously admirable. Now I'm curious then, Phil, because obviously you've worked on no small number. I wouldn't like you to guess how many products you've worked on or projects you've worked on. But over the course of the many things that you've had input in, is there one idea that you would take to the desert island and say, you know what, all things considered, this may not be the best, this may not be the most expensive, but this is the one that is most satisfying to me?
Yeah, super hard question. And, myself personally and the teams that I've been part of or put together, I've worked on and developed, hundreds and hundreds of products. So, and as you know, a lot of them globally sourced from inventors as well. So, assuming I'd be alone, I would think about taking something in relatively simplistic. You'd want something, hardware in, back in, because you don't know what weather you'll be subjected to on an island. Let's just say that the abrasion from the sand and the elements of the salt, right? So let's just say that one product back in 2013, Jenga Boom we put into market. And there's a really interesting story around that. And
I just gonna check. You said Jenga Boom there.
Yeah, Jenga
which is
Boom.
Jenga, the classic block
Yes.
displacing game.
But classic game that, you know, it needs a little explanation, and it's actually used in a lot of for a lot of great kind of in a lot of great kind of conversation starters. I know that certain companies take them into some of the, you know, developing territories in the world where maybe they need to build a school, or they need to, you know, build some foundation centers, or you know, build wells, and they use it as a conversation starter, because obviously the tribe that they may be engaging with do not have they don't have you know, fluent English, so they use Jenga as a means to build trust and engagement with each other. And so yeah, I know that is actually used today, but again, you know, very simplistic, very hard wearing. It's a lot of fun, no matter what scale that you have, whether it be the giant one in the garden or the one that's, you know, on a desktop. But yeah, what I loved about Jenga Boom is
but just to clarify, Phil, sorry, I feel the heel for interrupting. I'm loving it. But so just to be clear, Jenga Boom was a base.
Yes, it was
on which the Jenga blocks sat, and then it had a timer mechanism, and something clicked so that the base itself would tip over Jenga at some point.
Yes.
So you were fighting your opponent and the toy and the game.
Yeah, I mean, the base itself had a little pull cord, so, and then that would retract.
Right.
So that was technically the power source. And then, you know, it was against the clock, and as kind of the cord retracted, it then caused the plate to kind of rise, and then obviously the blocks come out. So Beautiful. It's kind of technically your opposition, right? But it also adds a little variation to the game.
Yeah, no, it's great.
So yeah, it again, it was a very simplistic product, but, you know, something that you know, came about actually in a really interesting way. At the time, we had a very talented intern, and we're very lucky within the business to have a great kind of program that pulls in from, you know, very wide and diverse school network. And, you know, my team was fortunate to have him as an extension of our kind of creativity. He was super sociable. He was really keen just to disrupt some of our classic games. And so we decided to casually just sit down and brainstorm together. And he pulled in another intern from another department, and I challenged them to build up some prototypes. And so a few iterations later, you know, we made some final tweaks. And so they were really pleased as punch, you know, with what we kind of forged together, right?
Yeah.
But the game changer came when I said, okay, now let me just get you a meeting with our senior gaming team, our senior management. And you could see their cheeks fill with you know, a little color, and so I got them a meeting with the management at the time, and so that, you know, even prior and prepping, they were like, okay, Phil, so, you know, what are you going to say? I said, I'm not going to say anything. I said, you know, this is going to be your pitch, you know, because they were the ones that were, you know, as we were collaborating, coming back with different ideas, and, you know, pulling various things apart and putting them back together. And so they were really nervous at first, but they absolutely nailed it. And, you know, it was a great experience for them, great experience for me. And yeah, so we passed it on to the core design and development and engineering team. And then, yeah, it went into market. And I remember then ordering some samples for them, you know, and this was, you know, after they'd left the business. And so yeah, they just felt it was very gratifying for them. And but yeah, it's a good story of a product that kind of sticks in my mind.
Yes, and the idea, I mean, it never would have occurred to me looking at that's born of two interns being pushed a little bit outside their comfort zone in that respect. And then again, the idea that you would make them pitch to the senior team. You know, pitching, I don't know. Well, I was about to say I don't know anybody that thrives on pitching. There are a couple of people that seem to really love it. But in terms of pitching tips, is that something that when you're being pitched to, are there some things that you look at and think to yourself, this is just horrible. If anybody does this, it's such a big turn-off that I can't really get on board with the rest of the pitch. Is there anything that's just, what's the one thing that no inventor should do for you in a pitch?
I think every pitch is different, and depending on the confidence level of the individual, and if they're seasoned, or they've actually kind of been in this game for some time, or if they're fresh faced. I've always taken a neutral approach to anything that I've seen, and I've always given the guidance after the pitch. So for example, if they've gone into much detail into a particular part which may not be the most effective part of the innovation they're showing, and then they lightly brush stroke kind of like the magic, which may be the tiny little mechanism which exists within the pitch, right? And but they're not to know, right? So the feedback at the end, like what GPA and what Inventor Relations does as a whole, is you're in a position then to feedback. And then you can say, actually, that was great. However, I would spend more time on this. We're always looking for a great story behind it. Obviously, how does it fit the brands or the brand portfolio as they see it? And part of the feedback may be then that we may see it in a different light. We may see it in either an opportunity that we're aware of internally. So I think of all the the pitches that I have seen, or any of my colleagues have seen. I don't think there's ever a case where it comes in as is and then ends up as is in market. There's always an evolution, So really it's about the tightening of the pitch, the focus on the key kind of breakdown elements. And then, Deej, that, Hasbro is very much an insight-led business, right? So anything to do around the target audience or the market or the category, really adds a lot of value. So, because a lot of our creation is very much data-driven. And that's kind of, you pull out the key performance metrics of whatever category or whatever part of the industry it is, and you're able to layer the idea on top of that, and that works really well for us.
That's a brilliant answer, actually, Phil, because I think it's easily overlooked. I think that sometimes one gets the impression when there's a brand new inventor and they're very, very excited about the idea, and their focus is on the idea and only the idea, and they're not really looking to see, well, is there any data at all to demonstrate that this Kipper-themed game has actually got a market? And of course, that's exactly the opposite end of the prism that you're viewing it from. You've got to see where yes, people like kippers, but nobody wants to play a game about kippers necessarily. There's got to be a bit more to it than that. So that's an interesting insight. And I suppose the other thing in terms of the receptiveness to feedback, which is a little bit, I guess, where Richard Branson, tying those two things together, to hear feedback and be resilient to it, and to hear it and take it and then say, well, that's okay. If Hasbro have said they need this, then I'm far better doing that for Hasbro than I am sort of ignoring that, saying, no, it's my way or no way. I'm soldiering on.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a couple of paths. There's a statement of intent to complete what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it kind of how it was originally forged. And then I think there is hey, I'm going to take the feedback here, and I'm going to be maybe smarter to take a pivot, or to take a turn left or a turn right. And I think there's both ways are right, but it really depends on kind of like how you want to adapt, or how you want to kind of literally kind of accelerate, So again, it may well be, if you take the literally accelerate route, that you may end up creating something in a white space which never existed before. And it may well be that if you took the pivots or the lefts and rights, that you start to adapt it into an area which already exists. So there's, and I'm sure there's a couple of other lanes, that I could kind of, walk you through. But yeah, it really boils down to the individual, and then it boils down to their willingness to kind of work with that partner and allow it to kind of maybe breathe fire in a different area.
Breathe fire in a different area. Wow. Nice analogy. I got lost in that for a moment there. Breathe fire in a different area. I like that. Very nice. I like a nice analogy. It's most people with any interest in language and hypnosis and that sort of thing just get a bit excited when they hear a nice metaphor. So I'm curious.
I blame the Welsh dragon, right? So there's an obvious tie in there, right?
It's a very bold flag, isn't it? The Welsh flag. What?
It's a beautiful flag. It really is, and I'm, as you can tell, a very proud Welshman. And
how often do you get back, Phil?
I get actually, well, not so much now because of obvious conditions and limitations that we're subjected to. But I'm sure that will all resolve over time. But I do like to get back at least 3-4 times a year.
Okay.
My family is still back in South Wales, just west of Swansea, in a small village called Penclawdd. It's where I grew up. It's where I would pick up a rugby ball or a cricket ball and bat and head off in the mornings in my summer holidays with my friends. And so a lot of my friends and family are still there. There's a saying, you can take the boy out of Wales, but you can't take the Wales out of the boy. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud mostly about my authenticity. And I feel that I can be myself, that this is all these years that, I've spent away from the village and from Swansea at large. And I always find that when I go back that, sometimes it's, nothing changes, I can walk into my my local rugby club, I can walk into my local bar and I can see the same faces and we can pick up the same conversations. And that's what I've loved most about, my upbringing.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just curious. It never occurred to me that you would be 4 times a year. I didn't know how often you would get back. Looking at the rest of the industry, at people's other ideas then, in terms of saying this idea has nothing to do with me, but I admire it tremendously. Is there anything in that respect that you would say, desert island choice, this is above them all?
In terms of maybe the, what it could bring, the experience it could bring. Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, if I was to listen to, let's say, a pitch from someone and, obviously they laid out all the trends and all the insights and everything else, but, they would have to, in this case, outline the conditions of the island and the temperature of where we would be and, is there any shelter? So, my logic would really be if I'm on an island and I'm, let's say, judging an idea or an opportunity, I'd have to break down the conditions and break down, all the kind of defining factors on, what that idea or opportunity would bring. And part of that would be kind of your well-being, your mental health, something that you could keep you occupied, knowing that you may be on your own. So again, you're building kind of like a criteria and yeah, certainly that would affect my choice of what I could kind of, take across. Hence me thinking a little bit deeper about the Jenga and no batteries or power, or anything for that matter.
It's actually a very the Jenga boom is a very robust, practical choice. No batteries. So you can play it on your own if Richard Branson gets off the island, or I'm sure he wouldn't leave you to it.
And then rocks up with a hero quest.
Yes, the board warps in the sun. I don't know. No, it's a good answer. I'm gonna. This has been very good. Obviously, there are a couple of things I have to wrap it up, but there are a couple of things that you would be allowed as luxury items One of them would be a piece of music. Well, let's start with that. If you're allowed a piece of music and say, I'm going to have one album or one type of music on the island for the rest of my life, where would you go with that? I would love to second guess this, but I have no idea where you could go.
Oh, well, my music choice is very, very linear. So I'm a big EDM fan. So I love DJs and something with a bit of energy behind it. So, give me a live podcast, from a famous club or location, that gives me energy. I love it. So, that would be my preference. Yeah, I'm a bedroom DJ myself, so I like to kind of, play around with a little bit of progressive house, and so and it will remain in my basement. I would never even think about playing live, but there you go. But yeah, the music choice is definitely would be energetic, kind of boundless energy.
Well, you surprised me there. I don't know really what I was expecting you to say, but I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of people wouldn't pick it up.
Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. But that might have been true of anything you said. I actually, looking at it, it was hard to guess what you would have gone with. That's a good answer. And similarly, if you were to take one book to the island, is there a book that you would say, this one?
Yeah, I mean, we've all read a lot of industry, inspiring kind of autobiographies by, people that we've mentioned on the call, right? But I'm going to take a little bit more of a logical kind of approach on this one. My favorite time of day is reading to my kids. And, it keeps reminding me of the importance of, being with them and hearing them laugh and the random silly conversations that come from them books. This week is the Tiger Who Came to Tea by Judith Kerr.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a favorite right now. But I probably have a very different answer for you next week.
This is interesting. I used to read children's stories at a story time session in local libraries, and that is one that that's a perennial classic. That is Judith Kerr, and anything by Julia Donaldson are all the kids' favorites. That's all they wanted to hear at the library.
Absolutely.
You could stuff Mr. Men. They weren't interested in that at all. Mr. Happy caused nothing but misery, let me tell you. But I am dressed like him to so that's a great choice.
I love the shirt.
Thanks. It's actually, I'm very Bananagrams driven. It's my Bananagrams shirt today. It's the only one that was. I put on another shirt earlier, a blue one. And I put myself under this light, and I thought, what will go well with this shirt? An iron. So I had to change at the last minute to something a little bit garish. So we're going to wrap it up now, Phil. Thank you so much, genuinely, for your company. I knew you'd be an interesting choice for this, an interesting change of pace, and I've really enjoyed catching up with you, as I always do. And we're going to end on a more philosophical note. It doesn't have to be morbid, it doesn't have to be deep, but it's entirely up to you. If you thought, for whatever reason, you weren't going to get off the island, that Richard Branson has abandoned you in a shuttle he's invented, he's stolen your book, he's dashed off, and he's left you to it, and you didn't think you were going to get rescued.
Yeah.
If you wanted to leave an epitaph for other people to find, what would you write and put in what message would you put in a bottle?
Yeah, I mean, so again, big question, right? So logically, if the bottle was to be found, you want to try and leave some coordinates as a beginning of the beginning of the letter, right? Whatever implement you're using to draw it with, I'm believing it's charcoal and a stick. The coordinates, in case a ship or a boat finds me, then great. But I keep it really simple. If it was a little bit late in the game and something needed to be passed on of value, I would quote something of the order: remember me for who I am, be authentic, respect others' opinions, show love where it's needed and needed most. I use storytelling as a vehicle to build memories, so I think that's important. Listen attentively, give knowledge when given the opportunity, and may that serve you well in the networks you build. and the friendships you forge, and be brave and bold, and successful should follow. That's something of what I would possibly kind of put together. But yeah, it served me well in upbringing and career life.
Wow, gosh, that's yeah. I think it would be quite easy for me to say something glib or be facetious about that. And while it would certainly be easy, it would be disingenuous, because I actually found what you've said there very moving. It's as close to a personal mission statement as I think I've ever heard, and it's lovely. I'm quite moved.
Thank you. No, I think, like I said, I think it would serve others well. And, may it serve, a personal current glide path better, so yeah, let's put that together as my last statement.
Brilliant. Lovely. Well, that's certainly going to be the last statement on this. I'm going to wrap it up there, because I can't think how to follow it other than to say, and you must have heard it 1,000 times, Phil Sage. Sage is probably the right word. You've been nothing but witty and wise. I greatly appreciate you freeing up your time. I know you've got far better things to do than talk to us. So sincerely, thank you. What a great pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Phil Sage, thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine.